In this video, we replaced some gauges. As you see, nothing on the dash works except for the fuel gauge. The oil pressure gauge works kind of. The temp gauge doesn't really work at all, and I've never figured out the alternator gauge. So we're going to replace those with a 3-gauge cluster, an aftermarket one. Okay, so now that we've made it home, let me show you the gauges that I got. I got this neat little gauge cluster from O'Reilly's. It has the water, the volts, and the oil in it. And we're gonna set that up on the truck. So let me show you well, I already showed you what was in the truck. The gauges, they kind of work. The oil gauge is very generic. It's just one step above an idiot light. The amp gauge has never worked since I got it, and the heat gauge hasn't worked, and I don't know if that's the wire or the sender. It could be either, because both has been repaired, and the sender's the original. So let's tear this thing open and see what it takes to put it in. Step one apparently is taking all the gauges out of the holder and figuring out where this thing is going to live. So let's go ahead, strip the bracket, and then go inside the truck and find out where we can mount it. On these gauges it's pretty easy. You just unscrew them and they come right out. So I'll get all these unscrewed, I'll strip this down, and we'll go inside the truck. Okay, so here inside the truck we have to figure out where to mount this. I originally wanted to mount it right here, but I'm afraid that the gear shifter might hit it. I thought about mounting it right here, but it's in the way of the cigarette ashtray, which I do use. I don't smoke, but I do use it for other things. So we'll get it mounted somewhere along here, and then just go from there. Okay, so I got the bracket mounted. Let's show you what I had to do. The factory hardware wouldn't work to screw it up, so I actually, because I had to drill through 2 pieces of metal, so I actually found some self-tapping screws that really got it in there tight. So that'll work right there, and the ashtray will still work. So let's go start running the lines. Now that we've got that fixed, we need to go find the oil sending unit, which is on the back of the engine, and we need to figure out where we're going to run these lines through the firewall. So let's do that. I see a hole up there, so let's go check it out and see if that's what we need. There's the hole right there, so that's about the best we can hope for. So let's go. And you see right there in the middle of the screen is the oil pressure sending unit, so let's go get that out. Okay, so we got it off, but unfortunately we had to break it in half to get it off. But here's what it looks like. This was sitting on top of that. So now we're going to go find the companion piece in the kit for this, wrap some thread tape about it, and drop it in. This is the companion piece right here. It's going to have this piece that goes along with it, and they're going to screw in together. But you got to get this hose in. This is the hose that feeds the gauge. So let's go put the bottom half of it together, and I'll show you how to do the top half. Here comes the tricky part. This right here bolts into the top of the piece we just put in the engine. You have to put this through this. Well, put this on here like this, and then this piece will go on top of this with the bevel down to fit into that, and then you screw it tight, and it will be a compression fitting, and it will lock itself in. But we're going to have to put a little bit of Teflon tape on this side here. But first, let's make sure we have enough hose, because that would suck. When I unwrap this doesn't look like there's enough, so if that's the case, we're going to have to figure out how to plug up that oil hole till I can find some more hose. Okay, it'll appear that I'll have enough. We're going to route it through that hole, and then we're going to run it through this hole here over to the back of the engine right there. Well, right there, you can see it. So what we're going to do now is put a little Teflon tape around this, screw it in, and then we'll put the rest of it together. A little tip: when I was putting it together, I put all this together inside here first and then round it, but I didn't mount it to the engine side. That way, if for some reason it didn't work on that side, this would still all be plumbed, but I wouldn't be screwing anything up on the other side, so it would only have to be attached to that side rather than hooking it up to a live feed and not being able to cap off this side. So that's just a little tip. Okay, so we got it round. We're gonna have to tidy this up here in a minute, but we got it all run, so let's give it a test start and see if it actually works and check it for leaks. All right, first start up here. Let's see what happens. Give it a pump. And hey, there we go. It's building. Maybe. Let's go see if it's got any leaks outside. It appears not to be leaking there either. It just got a bit of air to work out. Since you're running oil to the gauge, it's good to keep as much of the tubing as you can outside the truck, because if there's a leak, you'd rather have it out there than in here. But it is something to keep an eye on. That line just needs to be bled, so I'm going to tidy that up and get that working, and then let's get the next gauge hooked up. Now, the voltmeter is going to be the easiest thing to hook up. We have the power and the ground, and the reason I used green instead of red was because I have 19 rolls of red and I can't find one of them. So, but we got it hooked up. The ground is literally just that. It just hooks up to a chassis ground, and this is important. This does not go to a constant power. It goes to a switched power. So it's when the key is off, this is off. So we will go find a switched power and hooked it up to that. So let's see if we can find one. Okay, so we have a common ground here. We have it hooked into the fuse block over here. We need to tighten up these wires. We're not going to leave them hanging. But let's turn the volt gauge on and see what happens. And there we go. Now, if you had it hook up to a constant power, it would have immediately gone to 12. But we turn the key off and she drops. So that's a good sign right there. Now we got to hook up the water. I'm not going to hook it up today because I have to drain the radiator, and it's going to be a whole convoluted process to put it on. And when I drain the radiator, I'll hook it up. But when I do that, we're going to be doing a flush and a whole bunch of maintenance work on it, probably put a new radiator in it and whatnot. So I'm going to hold off on that, and I'll show you why. There's a little plug that goes into this, and it screws in. And it's pretty easy. It just goes right into the front of the block. So let me show you how that all works. This is the wire to the temperature sending unit, and it's down here under the alternator. It screws out of the front of the block, and pretty much just, and then we just basically route the wires. The wiring's already there. We just have to bring it through the firewall. But we're not going to do that today just because this is a really long process and I don't feel like draining the radiator because it's still really hot. Now I went through and wired up the instrument lights. I have them hooked up through the cluster fuse, so when you pull the headlights on, those will come on. The only problem I've had is that the wiring on these lights themselves are so flimsy and cheap that you have to be very careful with it. It's just, I don't even know if it would hold up to good solder. It is that cheap. So basically all I could do was just very carefully strip them, wrap them up, and tape them, because when I kept trying to crimp them, all they did was break. So let's turn the lights on and see what happens. And here we go. Hey, they came on. All right. All three of them too. One of the neat things that the light kit did come with, though, was these. I can change the colors to blue, to red, to green. I'm just going to keep them clear, but actually I might turn them green because the rest of the lights in the truck are green too. But aside from that, that's it. Now truthfully, the hardest thing to wire up was the oil pressure sending unit, but that's just because it took me probably an hour to get it all apart. I had to break the old one off. But if you don't have to break the old one off, it's very easy, very self-explanatory. Like I said, we didn't hook the water gauge up because it's just going to take so much to do it. And truthfully, I don't think I have enough cord to go all the way through the whole wrap in front of the engine. So we're not going to deal with that right now. And we'll keep an eye on the temperature sender up here. It does kind of work, but not really. But like I said, triple gauges, pretty easy. I'm probably going to have to bleed the oil pressure sender, or at least give it some time for it to work the air out of it. Just keep an eye on it and make sure it's not leaking oil. Check it, maybe a couple times a week, and look for drops. And if you have the plastic goes over any sharp edges, you need to wrap them and just make sure that they're not rubbing on anything sharp. But aside from that, the lights were pretty easy, and the volt gauge was really easy. It's all pretty straightforward. So I hope you liked the video. Wasn't much to it, but something I wanted to do for this truck. It looks a whole lot better now, and like I said, we'll get this all cleaned up, and we'll catch you next time. Thanks for watching.